Years ago, this man ordered the death of his own grandson, but the child who was never meant to survive returned with an army at his back, and the boy who should have died would go on to build one of the greatest empires in history. But how did a doomed child become Cyrus the Great?
Listen carefully, because the story I am about to tell you is not the story of an ordinary child. This is the story of Cyrus, the boy who changed the fate of an empire.
Years passed during the lifetime of his father, Cambyses, and in accordance with the ancient Persian tradition, he was entrusted with command of the army, a responsibility usually reserved for the future heir and the first step into the world of politics and warfare. Then in 559 BC, Cambyses died. With his father's death, Cyrus ascended the throne as king of Anshan. One of Cyrus' first decisions as king was to build the great complex of Pasargadae. Some historians even believe that agreements may have been made between Cyrus and the Babylonians. Even these rumors alone were enough to deepen Astyages' concerns. More than Babylon itself, he feared his own grandson. Eventually, Astyages summoned Cyrus to the capital. Perhaps he wanted to keep Cyrus under his watch. But Cyrus understood the situation just as well. He suspected that accepting the invitation could mean the end of his freedom or even the end of his life. So he refused the king's summons. The Median king decided to impose a punishment that no one would ever forget. One evening, Astyages invited Harpagus to a private banquet. When the banquet was over, Astyages calmly asked, "Did you enjoy the meal?" Harpagus replied that it had been a magnificent feast. The king smiled and ordered that a large covered dish be brought into the hall. The servants placed it before Harpagus. He lifted the lid. Inside were the head and hands of his own son. Without showing the slightest emotion, Astyages said, "What you have just eaten was your son's flesh." When the right moment finally arrived, he sent a secret message to Cyrus.
Ey pesar Kambuciye.
If you wish to rule the empire of Astyages, gather the Persians and rise against the Medes. I too will stand by your side. But delivering such a message to Cyrus carried enormous risk. He hid the letter inside the belly of a hare he had hunted. Then he stitched the animal back together and sent it to Pasargadae. By now, confrontation had become inevitable. At first, the early victories belonged largely to the Median army. Their greater experience and superior numbers gave them the advantage. But gradually, the tide began to turn. Harpagus' betrayal, Cyrus's leadership and courage, the determination of the Persian army, and Media's growing internal problems slowly shifted the balance in Persia's favor. After 3 years of fighting, Astyages was defeated. He was captured alive by Cyrus. With that defeat, Astyages' 35-year reign came to an end, along with 128 years of Median supremacy across much of Asia. Now all eyes turned to Cyrus. In the ancient world, defeated kings usually faced only one fate, death. But Cyrus chose a different path. He spared Astyages. He forgave his own grandfather. This was more than an act of mercy. That single act helped persuade a large part of Media to accept the new ruler. A few weeks later, Cyrus marched toward Ecbatana, the Median capital. Along the way, many Median tribes came out to welcome him. He was no longer simply the king of Persia. He now ruled both Media and Persia. The vast treasury of the Medes, filled with gold and precious jewels, also fell into his hands. Yet unlike so many conquests of the ancient world, the city itself suffered no significant destruction. Cyrus understood that if the different tribes felt excluded from the new government, the fragile unity he had created would quickly collapse. So he established a council made up of tribal elders, a body that later became known as the Royal Council. Nor were the Medes a people upon whom Cyrus could simply impose his will. They possessed an ancient civilization, and in many respects, one that was even more advanced than that of the Persians. The Medes taught the Achaemenids their 36-letter alphabet. They also introduced them to writing on deerskin instead of clay, and to using pens or quills rather than engraving tools for writing. New agricultural techniques were among the other forms of knowledge that passed from the Medes to the Persians. This union was not merely a military
Our path,
victory.
O king.
It was also the merging of two cultures.
Let us preserve
While
the
Cyrus
ancient
was
traditions,
consolidating his newly
our
won
sacred
kingdom,
beliefs.
three great powers surrounding his empire were watching events unfold with close attention. To the south stood Babylon, to the west lay Lydia. Both understood that the rise of a new ruler in Iran would sooner or later transform the balance of power across the region. There lay the wealthy kingdom of Lydia, occupying much of what is now Western Turkey. Its magnificent capital, Sardis, was one of the richest and most prosperous cities of the ancient world. Croesus was both a popular ruler and an extraordinarily wealthy one. Lydia's prosperity rested on its abundant gold deposits, and it became one of the first kingdoms to make widespread use of gold and silver coins in trade. Finally, in 546 BC, war began. The Lydian army crossed the frontier. The cities of Cappadocia and Tyria, both within Achaemenid territory according to the source text, were occupied. Afterward, Croesus's forces advanced as far as Syria, devastating cities along their path. They employed a strategy later known as scorched earth. As they withdrew from captured territories, they destroyed crops, supplies, and resources to ensure that nothing useful would be left behind for the enemy. Cyrus responded immediately. He marched his army toward the invaders. At the same time, he sent envoys to Croesus' allies, urging them to abandon the Lydian king. Almost none accepted his offer. Cyrus relied on more than courage alone. He paid close attention to even the smallest details. He made sure his soldiers had enough food, rested whenever possible, and drank water instead of wine whenever circumstances allowed. Yet among all the equipment accompanying the Persian army, one thing puzzled nearly everyone: the camels. On a vast plain, the two armies finally met. As the fighting began, Cyrus issued an unexpected command. Every camel in the Persian camp, mounted by fearless riders, was driven straight toward the enemy lines. The Lydian horses instinctively panicked at the unfamiliar scent of the camels. One after another, they bolted. Their riders were thrown to the ground. Croesus had no choice but to retreat into Sardis and seal the city's gates. Croesus hoped that the harsh winter would eventually force Cyrus to abandon the siege. Once again, his calculations proved wrong. A group of elite Achaemenid soldiers launched a surprise assault and captured one of the city's watchtowers. They gained control of part of the royal wall. A path into the city was opened. Cyrus's army poured into Sardis. According to Lydian custom, a defeated king was expected to appear before the victor dressed in his royal robes, before being burned alive upon a pyre built by his own soldiers. But for the second time in his rise to power, Cyrus made the very same choice he had once made with Astyages. He spared Croesus. He showed mercy. He even granted him royal accommodations, attendants, guards, and a portion of his own treasury. Gradually, yesterday's enemy became one of Cyrus' closest advisors. But perhaps the quality that set him apart from so many rulers of his age was the way he treated those he defeated. Time and again, he demonstrated that if mercy could transform an enemy into a loyal ally, he would always choose forgiveness over vengeance. Perhaps it was this philosophy that later allowed the Achaemenid Empire to stand not only upon the strength of the sword, but also upon the trust and acceptance of the many peoples who came to live under its rule.